We are back with Lieutenant Colonel Bill Cowan and Major General Bob Scales. We're looking at the situation in Iraq. Colonel, you were an advisor in Vietnam. This is a role that is familiar to you. When the president says he's going to send 300 advisors, what are those folks going to do?
We don't know until he tells us, Governor. And I'll say, as an advisor who was wounded 3 times in Vietnam, As an advisor I was. I don't think that he plans to put people out there in combat positions out of fear that something would happen. So we could have advisors who are back there helping the Iraqis with their trucks because they need them to move troops forward. We could have advisors working on intelligence, communications, medical. There's a whole range of things. What we have to hope is that these advisors are going to be positioned somehow so they can have a strategic influence.
Where will they be?
What the Iraqis do. My guess would be Baghdad because it's the safest. If we're going to start talking about airstrikes at some point, we have to think about somebody, U.S. types, out there helping control airstrikes.
Okay, so let's put the advisors over there and we'll put them on the board.
Hit the right targets.
All right. There go the advisors.
But it remains to be seen, Governor, where he's going to want to put them. And I think the first priority of the administration is going to be, let's make sure we put them where they're not in harm's way. Therefore, the question is, what can they really influence?
You know, as we look at this big picture, it's very apparent that this is a mess right now. Does Baghdad fall? And if it doesn't, why not?
Baghdad probably won't fall because Baghdad is 89% Shia. And the last thing that the Sunnis want to do, remember now, this is a Sunni army. ISIS is a Sunni army. The last thing they want to do is pick a fight in the heart of Shia Iraq. So they'll probably just leave it alone and continue to consolidate in this region by, first of all, capturing the most important thing in Iraq, which are the refineries and the oil fields.
And those are positioned over here in the eastern part
northeastern part near Kurdistan. The Kurds, of course, are fighting for the city of Kirkuk, which is the sort of the center of gravity for the oil region in Kurdistan. And as we speak right now, there's a fight going on between the Kurds and ISIS for the control of that city. So far, the Kurds, a very effective army, 350,000 soldiers, very dedicated to their craft, are doing pretty well against ISIS. But the main point of contention right now is twofold. Number one is seize and hold the oil fields, and number two is to consolidate this Sunni area, to turn it away from being simply captured cities into actually being a state, being, believe it or not, a terrorist state in the middle of the Sunni triangle.
Now, Iran is Shia. You've got the development of a Sunni state here.
Right.
A lot of the Arab world is Sunni. What does this mean for the United States strategically and the rest of the region?
It's a potential disaster. We all remember al-Qaeda prior to 9/11. Al-Qaeda is minuscule compared to this. And one of their avowed missions, once they consolidate this state and create what they call a caliphate, is to turn to foreign infidels, Europe, perhaps the United States, and they're so well trained, so well organized. They now have a state. God only knows what the next step of this operation will be for Americans at home.
Colonel, we've got aircraft carriers. We have ships out here in the Persian Gulf. Will we see airstrikes? And if so, what exactly are they going to be able to accomplish?
Well, great question, Governor, because there are good reports apparently that ISIS has captured Stinger missiles. That's shoulder-fired missiles by an individual person. I think that changes the dynamics about any kinds of airstrikes or what we try and use. But once again, if we're talking about airstrikes, you want to know specifically what that target is. We cannot afford to have collateral damage, that is the killing of innocent people by mistake, but those things happen because these guys in ISIS are smart people. They are going to try and construct whatever we, the Americans, do as showing the rest of the Sunnis that it's us, the Americans, lining up with the Shiites, Maliki, Iranians, whoever, to go after the Sunnis. And that makes the complexity of this, remembering again how many countries out there are Sunni, there's a lot of people who are going to listen to what ISIS says and maybe fall in line. It adds to the complexity.
The last thing we want is for the American Air Force to be depicted as the Shia Air Force. And remember I told you about ripping the intelligence structure, root and branch? 90% of an airstrike is not dropping bombs, it's doing the intelligence so you could hit your targets with great precision and avoid killing civilians. And right now, that country is black to us, and it's going to take us weeks, if not months, to put just the rudimentary form of intelligence over that country.
I mean, I think what you've reminded us is that it's not just pulling the troops out. We pulled everything we knew about that country out of there. We lost our informants. We lost the infrastructure of intelligence. So when the president says we're going to go back in there, it's like starting 15 years ago, not starting 15 months ago. We're really going that far back to try to resolve this. Bottom line, we're out of time, but I want to ask each of you for a summary. Colonel, let me start with you. Long term, where do you see this region going in the next 12 months?
Great question. I think the Kurds are going to break away up here, Governor. They've always wanted to. Turks used to have a problem with that. They don't anymore because of their relationship with Kurdistan. So the Kurds are going to end up being stable. But I think ISIS, these guys here, ISIS and the other insurgent elements, or terrorist elements, excuse me, over in Syria, they're going to continue to gain strength. They're not going to give up a lot of ground. They are going to develop a country. And the problem is they have upwards of 3,000 people with Western passports who can get on a plane just like you and me and fly to the United States. These are the long-term problems.
The Kurds up here in the Northeast, General, your assessment, next 12 months, what happens?
The next 12 months, I'm afraid that ISIS is going to consolidate and begin to create their version of a caliphate. I think the whole area will fracture into essentially 3 countries. The southern Iraq, the Shiite area, will begin to identify with Iran, so Iran's interests will be fulfilled by that. The Kurds, as Bill said, will form a separate state. ISIS will form a Sunni state, and the United States will be left in the lurch.
It is not a pretty picture.
No.
Gentlemen, thank both of you. It's been an honor to have you here, and thank you for your service to this country. We wouldn't be free without men like you, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure to have you. Thank you, Colonel. Well, you've seen the tactical and strategic breakdown of what's going on in Iraq. So, is the president right in sending 300 military advisors to Iraq? Connecticut Congressman Jim Himes, who's on the Intelligence Committee, tells us what he thinks when we come back.